In 1775, Thomas Paine wrote a pamphlet stating that the freedoms of men can only be maintained by limiting the power of government. The pamphlet was called Common Sense, and today it still is common sense.
I'm April G. Russo.
I'm Mark Zaccaria. This is Common Sense. Welcome back. Folks, if you have tuned in this week to get a reading on the pulse of the electorate here in Rhode Island, we can help you out. If you want to hear the latest on climate change in hopes of finding some rational information about how we can accommodate all sides in that slippery argument, you're in luck. We've got that for you too. Perhaps you were wondering about time management as a skill practiced by our federal delegation in Washington. No? Well, we were wondering about it, so get ready to hear our findings. As usual, this week's broadcast will feature an in-depth interview. This time we'll bring you State Representative Patricia Morgan going one-on-one with Jeremy Chiappetta of the Blackstone Valley Mayoral Academy. Together they will explore the details of school choice here in Rhode Island. Between segments of that briefing, April and I will reappear to ask and then answer our favorite satiric question, are you kidding me? Finally, commentator Jeff Richard will bring the program home with his ruminations on Representative David Cicilline and his recent attempt at a magic trick, making college debt disappear. Let's get things started, though, with an analysis of some of the top news stories affecting the Ocean State this week. April?
Thanks, Mark. Last week, as expected, Mayor Lisa Baldelli Hunt of Woonsocket easily topped a primary field of 3 in that city's nonpartisan primary. Her performance at the polls was as it was widely expected to be. There seems to be an electoral inertia behind her candidacy that is very likely to propel her to a new 2-year term. The mood in the Thunder Mist City is decidedly fatigued, though, and Mayor Baldelli Hunt is most often thought of as simply inevitable. That sense of the foregone conclusion of her re-election may even have spread to her own campaign. She does have a headquarters office established downtown. That's relatively easy for the mayor of a city with a high vacancy rate. Lawn signs are in evidence here and there, and she has held a meet and greet for her supporters, complete with beer and plenty of Woonsocket's signature dynamite sandwiches. Think spicy sloppy Joe with extra green peppers. It all has an air of painting by numbers, however, that would seem to foreshadow more business as usual in her next term. That is especially true when you consider that no candidate forums or public information events have occurred or are scheduled before November 8th. There will be precious few chances for voters to learn any more about their candidates. Despite a lively first campaign that propelled Ms. Baldelli Hunt from the state legislature to the mayor's office, she had had difficulties turning around the faded fortunes of her hometown. There's still no full-service grocery store in the city, whose monthly food stamp economy engulfs many who have very limited transportation options. The vacancy rate I mentioned a moment ago is worse for commercial properties than it is even for retail space. That means employment opportunities are limited, and so the city's social services are perennially stretched to the breaking point. The mayor's opponent in the general election will be City Councilman Roger Gillette. He may be banking on his name recognition following many terms on the council. His campaign is even more threadbare than the mayor's, however, and he shows no signs of either the energy or the ideas which would be needed to move the needle on Woonsocket's economic malaise. We will hear much this election season about the state government's responsibility to spark a better business environment here in the Ocean State. Nowhere would actual movement on that count be more welcomed than in Woonsocket. Until those election year promises are converted into effective action, though, it seems that Mayor Baldelli Hunt and her tired constituency will just continue to mark time. Too bad. Mark?
Thanks, April. Folks, let's put out an all-points bulletin for Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. He really needs to hear this next story. John DeSico, Ph.D., is a research professor at the University of Michigan's Energy Institute. In fact, Senator Whitehouse may already have Professor DeSico's number on his Rolodex. For more than a decade, the professor's research has been focused on carbon dioxide emissions as a driver of global warming. So the two may well have already met. Last week, DeSico published an extensively peer-reviewed research paper entitled Carbon Balance Effects of U.S. Biofuels Production and Use. Don't yawn. His conclusion is that the use of ethanol from corn sugar in motor fuels actually increases the carbon footprints of cars and trucks, as opposed to that of vehicles using gasoline alone. Apparently, the accepted wisdom before this research had been that the leafy corn plants absorb CO2 from the atmosphere as they grow, thus creating an offset to the CO2 liberated later when the ethanol is burned. DeSico noted that the farmland cultivated with corn for ethanol would certainly be cultivated with some other leafy plant if there were no market for biofuels. In fact, those same fields would probably be used to grow corn for human consumption or animal feed. For this, you need a PhD? Okay. The point is that you can't count the offset. Since ethanol combustion produces more CO2 per unit than refined gasoline, the net effect on greenhouse gases is greater. In other words, Senator Whitehouse, the two arguments for forcing more expensive motor fuels into American cars and trucks are based on political policy, not on scientific fact. Since the Carter administration, it has been an article of faith that adding ethanol to our fuel both makes us less dependent on foreign oil and emits fewer greenhouse gases. The technology associated with hydraulic fracturing and crude oil exploration has made the U.S. completely energy independent. In fact, today we are a net exporter of petroleum, whereas during Jimmy Carter's day, we imported more than 40% of our daily consumption. Take that, OPEC. Now that it appears we can also eliminate ethanol from our fuel supply on greenhouse gas grounds, we would see a decrease in the per gallon cost for gas and have much more corn available to fight hunger worldwide. Huh? Well, that's a twofer. Is that a twofer or what? And by the way, since Congress passed the Renewable Fuel Standard in 2005 and revised it in 2007, an ever-increasing percentage of ethanol in motor fuel has been mandated. Meanwhile, the amount of the corn crop has only increased marginally, but the percentage of that crop going to ethanol production has grown substantially, from 12.4% to 38.6%, according to John DeSico, if you're scoring at home. Also, during that 11-year period, the worldwide number of hungry mouths to feed has gone up considerably. So, is it time to rethink renewable fuels? You tell me, Mr. Whitehouse. April?
Mark, I gotta tell you, don't just sit by the phone waiting for that call from Sheldon Whitehouse. Folks, our junior senator has other work in Washington right now, and it is sadly emblematic of how often he misses huge problems because he's dealing with minutia. The senator's public relations staff have been working overtime to position a very important story in The Hill, a newspaper and now blog that is closely watched by everyone in the Capitol. What is it these flacks are pushing to further pump up their boss's stature inside the Beltway? Why, it is the good looks of Middletown's Cameron Green, an intern on the White House team who has just been designated by The Hill as one of Washington's 50 most beautiful people. What a coup. One of the senator's staffers was mentioned in the Bible of House and Senate legislative introspection. Sadly, it was for good looks, not good legislative work. And for the record, Mr. Green was quoted as saying that his David Beckham-esque do is all homemade and represents the largest investment of time he makes while getting ready for work each day. In the article on the gentleman's selection for his objectification, he went on to say that he stays fit playing soccer and tries to channel European style rather than that preppy look favored by his peers in D.C. See, this is why I could never be a fashionista. I can't even keep a straight face while presenting this crap. Rhode Island desperately needs leadership from its congressional delegation to help it stay focused on lowering costs so it can lower taxes and finally start to create a better economic environment for business growth. That's going to take some coordinated effort with the feds to offload certain state overhead requirements and maybe even score some DC dollars to cover the shortfall while we downsize. Meanwhile, the federal government is in such disarray that the Chinese think they can publicly disgrace President Obama and get away with it. No. They did get away with it, so they know they can. Russia invaded the Crimea earlier this year, and now they are eyeing more of the Ukraine and all three of the Baltic states. The so-called Iran nuclear deal is a total capitulation by America, complete with pallet loads of banknotes being secretly ferried to Tehran, so you, Senator Whitehouse, and I wouldn't find out. Yo, Senator, do you think you could spend some time on that pesky advise and consent requirement imposed on you by the Constitution? Or have you recently taken up the violin so you can fiddle while the whole world burns? Mark?
Whoa, April, speaking of burns. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our analysis of the news which most affects Rhode Islanders this week. Next up is our extended interview with Jeremy Chiappetta. Before we get to the first segment of that presentation, though, let's stand by for just a moment while someone asks the all-important question, are you kidding me?
In 2 months, Providence's Mayor Elorza has lost 3 high-level members of his administration. That's got to be a record, right? These are the boys and girls you hear about in the media. I wonder who else at City Hall has quietly slipped out the side door unnoticed. Is there anyone left on the mayor's staff whose job it is to think about what all this looks like to the outside world? Are you kidding me? Evan England, the Director of Communications, is the 3rd high-ranking member to jump ship from the Elorza administration, and he happens to be the 2nd employee to leave for greener political pastures. England will be working with State Treasurer Seth Magaziner, while Brett Smiley, the former city chief operating officer, left the administration to work as Governor Raimondo's chief of staff. So what gives? Look, the governor has a growing cadre of PR flacks. Maybe she could be a good neighbor and lend 1 or 2 to the mayor for a little while. Everybody knows that no one swims toward a sinking ship, so it should be the PR department's job to make sure that's not what it looks like. Elorza ran for office in 2014, so it's only been 2 years at best that he and his administration have been employed by the taxpayers of Providence. I can understand people looking for bigger and better jobs, but this turnover rate is higher than I think most of us would expect, especially for what should be some of the best power positions in Rhode Island. So what gives? Should we think they really are swimming away from a sinking ship? Are you kidding me?
Welcome to Common Sense Rhode Island. This is a program where we try to make sense of the policies that affect your life and come up with common sense solutions. Today we have with us Mr. Jeremy Chiappetta, who is the Executive Director of the Blackstone Valley Prep Mayoral Academy, which is quite a mouthful. We'll just call it Blackstone Valley Prep. And this is a charter school that's in Pawtucket.
So we serve young people in Pawtucket, Central Falls, Cumberland, and Lincoln, and we have schools in several of those communities.
Oh, so you have more than one?
We do. We believe in small schools, so we have small schools, but we actually are operating 5 different schools right now.
So you have 5 different schools. You're kindergarten through the 10th grade.
10th grade, yeah.
And how many students, scholars in each building?
So it varies. So our 3rd elementary school, which is opening this year, only has 60 scholars. So it's 2 major homerooms, and then our middle school is fully enrolled with about 325.
Okay.
And the high school is just 9th and 10th grade with 200 this year, but it's going to continue to grow.
Okay, actually I graduated from a high school with 400 students in it, and I see real advantages in knowing everybody that you go to school with. It
Absolutely.
becomes a real friendly environment and a community of people.
Absolutely.
So is that why you prefer the smaller?
So
Kids don't get lost.
Absolutely. When you think about what's happening in public education throughout our country, there are way too many young people getting lost. And
Yeah, when there's 1,500, it's easy for them to get
it's
lost.
far too easy. And we owe it to every one of our young people to personalize their education, to meet them where they are, and to push them to achieve the highest levels. And that's what we're trying to do. And I think small schools help to do that.
And what's the average size of your teacher's classroom?
So class size, unlike school size, class size is actually pretty big. So we're a class size of usually about 27.
Okay.
And what we do to balance that is at the elementary level and in many other grade levels for reading and math, we will do a co-teaching model, where we'll have 2 educators in the classroom to support that class.
Okay, I did some of that myself at one point, but all right, so charter schools feel like private schools because they're small, because they're kind of off to the side. But
uniforms, we have uniforms at
you have
ours.
uniforms, okay, but they're really public schools. Tell me tell me about that difference, and why are you not considered a private school? Why are you a public school?
So we're a public school because we are publicly funded, we are publicly authorized to operate. We follow regulations, both federal regulations that authorize charter schools, and then state regulations that oversee us, and state law, which enables us to exist. Every 5 years, we're reauthorized or not by the Board of Education.
In other words, you have to have certain academic standards, you have to meet certain levels
Academic standards, financial standards, operational viability. The Department of Ed, they have an incredibly rigorous process, not just to become a charter school, but to remain a charter school. There's a week-long site visit with a team that comes in, visits virtually every classroom, pores over data, reads the minutes from our board meetings for the last 5 years, truly.
So it's very, very rigorous.
Absolutely. And we're public. Our meetings are posted on the Secretary of State website.
Okay. Have any charter schools not been given approval, or are we not that far into the...
So nationally, there are a number of examples of public charter schools that have had their charters revoked. And in Rhode Island, that has not happened, although there have been charter schools whose renewals have been conditional, or instead of getting a 5-year renewal, it's a shorter term renewal based on whatever the decisions.
So the ones that stay in business have to be good.
Absolutely.
In a lot of different metrics.
Absolutely. I mean, we are publicly accountable, and certainly the charter that we have says that we're going to meet these certain goals and objectives, and if we're not doing that, then, if we don't have clean audits, if we're not producing great results, we shouldn't exist.
Okay, all right. But Blackstone Valley Prep Mayoral Academy
Yes.
is a real shining example
Thanks.
of what works.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about it and why it's working and what it does for students.
So, in the most recent round of test reporting, a couple years ago now, because of the whole shift from NECAP to PARC.
Yes, oh yeah.
But in every grade level, in reading and math, our scholars outperform the state average. And, we're especially proud in 8th grade math. They had the highest test scores in the entire state.
The highest in the state?
Yeah.
In math?
In math.
Okay.
Which is one of these areas that we're all so concerned
Everybody's
about.
always struggling with.
And somehow, and it's not a secret sauce, it is incredible hard work. That's the somehow our scholars achieve, greatness, truly. And it happens when teachers, parents, and scholars, students are working together. And it's happened at Blackstone Valley Prep. And we're thrilled.
Okay, so this brings me to the charges that you cherry pick your students. And the reason you have such good results, such high test scores, is that you pick the best and the brightest. Tell me about your selection process.
So this past year, we collected the names of everyone in the community who was age eligible, who was interested in attending Blackstone Valley Prep. And we knocked on doors, we did flyers, we did some direct mail, we were in preschools, Head Starts, daycares, churches, handing out flyers. And through that, we got...
So any and all people in those communities?
If you live in the communities that we serve, urban, suburban, Cumberland, Lincoln, Central Falls, Pawtucket, that's where we serve.
You got the word out.
We worked hard to get the word out. We were on Spanish radio, doing everywhere we could be to let folks know about the choice. We had 2,200 applications this past year for about 200 seats, so about 10 to 1.
Okay.
And the way the process works is there is a preference for if you have a sibling that's already in the program, trying to keep families together.
Okay.
Right? At the center is families. And so if there's a sibling, and that's federal regulation allow that, state regulation allows that. But otherwise, it's a random lottery. And we do give a preference for low-income kids. So if you're poor, you actually have an extra chance of getting in. So we're trying to serve those hardest to need. But we also want that intentional diversity of urban and suburban. So the random selection process, it's a computer. I don't see the names until after. In terms of what goes in, comes out. It doesn't matter who you know. If you know the governor,
Doesn't matter.
You know Representative Morgan. I'm sorry. That's wonderful. I'm so glad you know Representative Morgan.
But it doesn't help you get into
doesn't help you get in.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about the demographics of your student population then.
Sure. So it is truly diverse. And when you say when I first thought of diversity, I was a first year teacher in Harlem. And as a white male going into this particular school, I thought I was meeting diversity. 99% low income, almost all Latino, some African American. I thought that was diverse. Not at all. Diversity is true differences. That was homogeneous. Diversity is when you have all kinds of differences. In Blackstone Valley Prep, we're about 65% free reduced lunch. So some of our kids are not free reduced lunch. They're living, financially
Fine,
comfortable
sure.
lives. Some of our kids are living in abject poverty, are experiencing homelessness, and
English
are-
is second language?
yeah, about 40% of our kids speak another language at home.
40% speak another language at home?
About 12%.
20% are actually getting instruction in English?
So we have, the number shifts every year a little bit. So about 20% of our young people last year were English language learners, officially classified. But a quarter of our young people exited the program last year. So they did well enough in English to actually no longer be an English language learner. So our numbers are actually falling a little bit this year, which
Okay.
that's a good way to get the numbers down.
All right, well, we're going to talk a little bit more about that because you have good results with
Thanks.
those your student population. And we'll be back in just a minute.
Okay, now I am really angry. I'm mad at Mike Barnacle of the Boston Globe and MSNBC. The reason I'm so steamed is the theft of intellectual property. But it's actually the fault of former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson. That's right, Johnson is the Libertarian candidate for president. Last week, he was interviewed on air by Mike Barnacle, who asked the question, "What do you think of the situation with Aleppo?" Johnson answered, "Huh?" And that's when Barnacle did the dirty deed. His reply to the candidate? "Are you kidding me? Hey, that's my line." Later, candidate Johnson said he'd first thought Aleppo was one of the million or so federal acronyms he's been struggling to remember. The Ralston Purina Company immediately started an ugly rumor that Johnson had really believed Aleppo was a brand of dog food. Vladimir Putin's English is a little rusty. He thought the question was about Gestapo, but he was ready to answer. Hillary Clinton was happy she hadn't been asked because she thought Mr. Barnacle had said alibi. But of course, she's got plenty of those. Donald Trump also heard the question incorrectly. He thought that in a heavy Boston accent, Mike Barnacle had asked about Calypso. "Calypso is really amazing," Trump remarked to his campaign staff, which immediately started penning a press release in praise of Jacques Cousteau. The entire Colorado congressional delegation's first thought was that Gary Johnson had broken his pledge to stay off the cannabis until after the election. And Bill Weld just shook his head and skulked off to Southie for a beer. Well, let that be a lesson to all of them. Rhode Island may not have too much about which to be proud these days, but when it comes to signature slogans, we already have one, and we're a little possessive about it. Do you think that's why Warmer Cooler never caught on? Are you kidding me?
Welcome back. Today we're talking with Jeremy Chiappetta, who's the Executive Director of the Blackstone Valley Prep Memorial Academy, BVP.
BVP.
And we were just talking about the selection process, and it's pretty clear to me that you don't cherry pick then.
It's really frustrating because honestly, we work so hard on outreach to make sure that those families who need our program the most are most aware of it, and the data shows. I mean, with over 2,000 applications for just 200 spots.
And you have kids of all economic levels.
Absolutely.
So it's
Absolutely.
very poor kids, kids that are in the middle class. You have kids of all ethnicities.
Yes,
You have special education students.
absolutely.
What
Absolutely.
percentage?
So we're at about 11-12% of kids have an individual education plan, which is really right at the national average.
Okay.
Rhode Island as a state has the highest identified special ed population in the country, right around
Yeah, I'm aware of
17%.
that. All right, but you do take special education kids.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there are actually examples. When I worked in the traditional public schools, there were kids that the traditional public school couldn't best serve. And so when I was in Providence, we actually spent tens of thousands of dollars to send some small group of students to specialized programs.
Yes.
And we do that too. So we are paying, in some cases, $60,000, $70,000 a year because they're ours. They came to our program. They started with us, and we found that we couldn't best serve them, and they needed a highly specialized program, and we're responsible for that tuition. That comes
Okay.
out of our operating dollars.
Okay, so I didn't realize you took the real difficult special needs
We
students?
do our best. We have a therapeutic learning center where we have, at the elementary level, some of our really needy scholars.
Sure.
Ideally, it's transitional, and we're getting them back in a general classroom as soon as possible. But for some scholars, that's 18, 24 months or more.
Okay,
But we're taking all comers.
okay, all comers. So you said you're oversubscribed. 2,200 people, or scholars, or parents, I guess it is, asked for their child to come to your schools, and you can only take 200. Why do they come?
So I think for every parent, I'm a parent, you're a parent, right? Every parent, the decisions that we're making are in the best interest of our kids, right? So I have yet to meet a parent, whether it was in Harlem or Providence or Blackstone Valley Prep, that doesn't want the very best for their kids.
That's right.
And for some, their neighborhood school in their traditional community is fabulous, and they choose that.
Okay.
For
They're
others,
thriving.
they're
Their
thriving there,
students are
and that's
thriving.
great. I mean, we want everyone to be in a great public school
Sure.
that they want to be in.
You want everybody to thrive.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. But there are clearly large numbers of folks who have there are probably 2,200 different reasons for those families of why they're choosing. Some have shared with me they truly want that academic rigor that we offer, that college prep, starting in kindergarten. College starts in kindergarten. There are some that want that. Some have told me they love the discipline and the structure of our program. They wear uniforms. We
Okay,
hold
sure.
tight, rigid cultural expectations.
Well, when you have uniforms, there's no need to compete for the latest
And when you have the difference
skirt,
that we have,
blouse, jacket,
the newest Jordans or whatever.
the newest Jordans.
Right, but the reality is when you have the differences that we have, when you have kids living in abject poverty and kids living middle-class lives,
They come, they look the same,
absolutely,
they're dressed the same.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So the families are seeking us out for all kinds of reasons. Some are choosing us specifically for the diversity. They recognize that me as a parent, I want my daughter and my son and my other daughter now to be ready for the world, and the world doesn't look like them. The world looks like all kinds of difference. And there are a lot of parents who choose us because they recognize that whatever their neighborhood school is, our neighborhood schools are homogeneous, right? That those,
Yes, they are.
that they are, and we're highly stratified as a state. And we have pockets of one type living here and another type living here. And at Blackstone Valley Prep, we're bringing those families together, and I think some people do choose us for that.
Well, I was a school teacher, and I know that all kids, I was a special educator, so I know that all kids don't learn the same way. And many times in the traditional public school, we teach them kind of one way and don't individualize. There's so many different ways to read.
Right.
I actually was a reading teacher, so there's so many different ways to learn
Yeah.
reading. But you have to say, okay, I'm not just going to teach phonics or whatever it is. I am going to try this other way. And if that doesn't work, you try another way until you can get a child to learn. Because not every child learns the same. Right?
If that were true, the work would be so much easier.
Right. And so sometimes even a different environment, a different culture makes that child something up here wake up, and they are able to take more in and learn more. So we're not criticizing the traditional school, but not all kids learn well there.
And I would say the same is
They
true
don't
in charter
maximize
schools.
there. Yeah.
The same is true. I mean, I have 3 children, right? All 3 will be at BVP this fall, which I'm thrilled about. But the reality is, if it's not the best fit for one of them, because those 3 kids, they are different. They each have their own personalities, their own motivations, their own drives. And quite honestly, as a parent, I want what's best for my kids.
Absolutely.
As every parent I've ever met does.
Find the right match for them.
I need to find that right match. And that's what choice is about. And that's why, I'm a firm believer in families having school choice.
Yeah, well, I'm a firm believer in every child maximizing his potential.
Absolutely.
Wherever they find it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So one of the strengths that you have is that you form relationships with families. You actually support parents and students, not just the student, but the family as well. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because that's actually fairly innovative, I think.
So in some ways it's innovative, and in other ways, quite honestly, we're just doing what the best teachers everywhere do. I think of Barbara in Providence, a good friend of mine. I worked with her. She was there early. She stayed late. She was on the phone with mom and dad of her students all the time.
Okay.
And that's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to systematize so that every one of my teachers is as good as Barbara, right? And so what are we doing with families? We're doing some of the things that she did. Going out to the home and sitting down with the family at the beginning of the year. Making sure that families understand what's expected. Making sure that families know how to get homework help, right? At night, give that call.
Yeah.
We invest in infrastructure to support that.
When that math comes in the door and they don't know how to do
goodness,
it.
right?
Yeah.
How many parents out there really know 8th grade algebra, right?
Not many, I think.
Right? I mean,
it's way in their past.
Way in the past, right? And so, giving access to those teachers, we ask our teachers to answer their phone till 9 at night.
Okay.
And there are kids who are calling at 8:55 with questions on homework. And our expectation is that the teachers are helping them or getting back to them, certainly within a business day. I mean,
So when a student scholar
yeah.
has a problem in the classroom or at home, there's that open dialogue between both, so the teacher knows that the child has an issue.
Absolutely.
Whatever it is.
Absolutely. I mean,
Don't know what a noun is. Right?
And I don't want to over idealize this, right? I mean, the reality is this is hard work, and the reality is we have a lot of work to improve in every aspect of our program, from family engagement to academic programming. I mean, we can always get better, but the reality is we are focused, and we are telling our families and we're telling our staff that relationship matters, and that from the beginning, from before the first day of school, we are building a partnership between scholar, teacher, and family.
Okay, and they seem to be thriving.
We are having some successes.
You're having success, which is great because, again, it's about maximizing the potential of every child so
Absolutely.
that they can get what they want out of life.
Absolutely.
All right, so we're going to take a little bit of a break now, and we'll be right back.
Justin Katz of the Ocean State Current recently posted an article titled "The Education That $62,000 Per Year Buys You." And naturally, I was intrigued. He's referring, of course, to Brown University tuition and was highlighting a new policy at the Ivy League institution that was reported by Newsweek. The policy in question is that Brown will put menstrual products in women's, men's, and gender-inclusive bathrooms. That might sound like a bit of wasteful spending, at least for some of those bathrooms, but the rationale is that, and I quote, "Not all people who menstruate are women." Are you kidding me? What? I'm sorry, I'm just having trouble wrapping my brain around this one. Brown University believes that people other than physical women menstruate. I mean, I can understand if you want to put maxi pads all over, because I'm sure anyone could use them. I mean, we all have plumbing after all, and maybe that's exactly what the university is doing. But I need them to be more specific with the word choices. I'm envisioning tampons in the men's bathroom, and I'm not gonna lie, having a hard time with it. I applaud the university's approach to gender neutralize and work on what they call a tone of trans inclusivity. I just think they're taking it a bit too far. Full disclosure, I don't know how the plumbing works when you transition, so this move might be completely necessary. But doesn't it sound odd to anyone? Alright, let's see. Yeah, that's Siri here. Alright, menstruation. Noun. The process in a woman of discharging blood and other materials from the lining of the uterus at intervals of about 1 lunar month from puberty until menopause, except during pregnancy. So, physical, biological gentlemen in the audience, how often do you discharge blood and other materials from the lining of your uterus? Are you kidding me?
Welcome back. Today we're talking with Jeremy Chiappetta, who is the Executive Director and Founding Principal of Blackstone Valley Prep Mayoral Academy. And we've just been talking, Jeremy, about the students and their families, and how the schools try to form relationships and support both of them in their learning. It sounds like there's a lot of work for teachers.
Absolutely.
Teaching is a demanding profession. If you do it right, it takes a lot of time and a lot of energy, because keeping up with all those little bodies in a classroom. Tell me about the teachers. Do they all stay? Do you have a lot of people who
Sure.
leave because it's too much for them?
So, Blackstone Valley Prep, we absolutely believe teachers are everything. And we know that there's not a smart board out there, a computer out there, a building out there, a book out there, as important as those things might be, that's ever taught a student.
That's right.
It's the adults, it's the teachers who day in and day out are creating innovative lesson plans and different ways of engaging young people so that they can push themselves to learn as much as humanly possible. And
Teachers are the most important component of a classroom. I
Absolutely.
absolutely agree.
and we know that, like, in our guts, we know that heuristically in our hearts, and the reality is there's all kinds of scientific data that says that too,
Absolutely.
right? And so whether it's out of Stanford or name the university, it's been studied. And so we recognize that, we know that, and so we spend an incredible amount of care and time invested in trying to find the very best teachers, recruiting them in a really, some would say, crazy, intense process that includes everything from resume screen to phone screen to live interview to demonstration lesson
Okay.
and feedback on that demonstration lesson, oftentimes writing samples, all, and then extensive reference checks, all as part of
So
becoming
they
a teacher.
have to really want to teach there to be hired. Okay.
Absolutely. And you have to be great. Or you have to have a growth mindset, a belief in young people, right? So if you believe, you're willing to put the hard work in, and we see raw talent, and you believe in the power of young people, and you believe in our mission of putting all kids on a path to college, not most, not some, all, you're likely to be successful in getting hired. And then once you're hired, there's an intensive training process and
Well,
support
I was
process.
just going to say that. Teaching is an evolving profession.
Absolutely.
Right? What you learned in college isn't necessarily the same techniques or strategies that you're going to use with the students
Sure.
in front of you, because the students are different, right? The students change every year, and the things they have to learn change over time.
And what we're
The
asking-
basics always remain there, but there are always differences. So what do you support teachers in their professional development? How do you do that?
Yeah, so when I worked in Providence and when I taught in Harlem, there was a day, sometimes 2 days before the first day of school,
Okay, yep,
of getting people together to get onboarded and get ready. At Blackstone Valley Prep, we take a month.
okay.
So teachers started this past week training and getting ready for the first day of school on August 31st.
Okay, what's that look like?
So that looks
That's
like...
not just arranging the desks and the books.
No. That is everything from intensive team building and trust so that we can work together as school
How do you
teams.
mean what kinds of teams?
So school teams. So the middle school comes together as a middle school team and is getting to know one another. Getting to know why you, Representative Morgan, are a teacher. Why I, Jeremy Chapetta, am a teacher. What drives you? What motivates you? And if I understand what's driving you, you understand what's driving me. I know your strengths, you know my strengths. Our ability to work together, support one another is heightened, right? And so we take time to invest in that.
So you're building a culture of
Absolutely.
excellence. Okay.
Absolutely. The founding head at Paul Cuffey Charter School was famous for saying you only need 3 things to run a great school: culture, culture, and culture.
Culture.
Right. And so, David Bourne, with homage to him, truly, we're focused on that. But we're also focused on all kinds of skills, because teaching, it's cultural, it's skill-based. There are specific teacher moves that matter.
Yeah, different teaching strategies.
And we do it in an embedded way. So in the mornings, starting this past week, in the mornings, we're bringing our neediest scholars in. Those scholars who have maybe some learning challenges in different areas. We're bringing a quarter of our scholars in for the morning, so that our teachers are working with them in an intensive way.
To pinpoint what their challenges are, or to
It's 2 things.
Okay.
1, it is to support their learning needs, and 2, it's to give teachers extra practice, at-bats, and feedback on how they're teaching.
so others.
It's embedded training and professional development.
Okay.
Coaching is happening live,
So they coach, they mentor, they share
Absolutely.
strategies and ideas.
Absolutely. I mean,
What works for you?
right.
I can't teach fractions. Tell me what I'm doing wrong, kind of thing. What is working for you?
Well, one of the real innovations, and this we actually did in partnership with some teachers in Central Falls and in Providence through actually a federal grant supported this, where we were doing what the New England Patriots do, which is we were looking at game film,
Okay.
right? So so we invested in
So you
And
videotape the entire,
videotape the class.
yeah.
And then watch yourself.
Watch
not
the
for
lesson.
not for social media, not to put on Facebook, but for you to watch yourself, or for you to watch yourself with your coach, to see, okay, what were the things that worked well, so I keep doing those things.
Sure.
And where did I make some maybe some teacher mistakes that we all make, so that I can work hard to
Yeah,
push
to
those things
figure
out.
out I'm doing them wrong so I don't keep doing them wrong.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, so a lot of development of the culture and also of the skills and techniques of the teaching staff.
And the curriculum.
Okay.
Right? So we're also spending time rolling out units. I mean, the reality is what we expect as a country, as a state, our young people to be able to know and do, in reading and in math, especially in science, quite honestly, is it's incredibly rigorous. We are asking a ton.
It seems like we ask more and more every year of the little ones too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if that's where the bar is, we need to make sure that our teachers know the content, and not just a little bit. You know, when I taught in New York, I'll be honest, sometimes I was a chapter ahead, maybe
Okay.
a couple pages ahead. The reality is, in order to teach today, you need to deeply understand your content, and so we spend
We
time
do.
working on that too.
On content as well, not
Absolutely.
just the teaching strategies.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
if you don't understand fundamentally the theme of
ins
the
and
book
outs, sure.
that you're teaching, and if you haven't read it and reread it and marked those pages up and thumbed it 5 different times, your ability to go in and teach that text is super challenged. And so, how do you do that? It takes time. It takes creating book
It
clubs.
sounds, do you retain most of your teachers then?
So we do. We this past year we had about 85% of our staff came back.
So a lot of satisfaction.
So a
of
lot of
working there.
satisfaction. You know, and the reality is we are losing teachers sometimes because we're not asking them back. We have high expectations, and some people, Blackstone Valley Prep isn't the right fit, and so we do exit folks. And then there are other folks that they choose to leave, and we're sad about it. You know, often they're moving away. Most people we're losing that we don't want to lose, they're moving out of state to another region. Maybe a spouse got another job somewhere else. And so we're losing
I
folks that
tell
way.
you, I was on the Health and Education and Welfare Committee, and members of Blackstone Valley Prep came in, and they were so in love with the school and teaching there. They just wanted it to stay as a strong and vital part of the educational establishment. They just loved teaching it, despite the fact that it is rigorous on the teachers as well as on the students.
I think it's because of that they love it.
That's
And they know that
makes
all
for
their
a good
peers,
school.
all their peers are all in with them. That matters.
Yep. All right, we're going to take another break, and we'll be back.
Russ Moore, writing in Go Local Prov, took note of the fact that the recent departure of Dean Esserman from his position as Chief of Police in Hartford reverberates here in Little Rhodey. Those who remember Esserman's term in Providence have no trouble believing the Connecticut reports that the former chief left Hartford in a hail of invective and bad behavior. So, what's the Ocean State connection? Are you kidding me? Why, David Cicilline, of course. All the bad blood generated down in the Nutmeg State brought flashbacks and cold sweats to many Rhode Islanders as they physically relived the decline of their capital city under the team of Mayor C. and Colonel E. In those days, whatever respect for the city as an institution there might have been was eroded by the executive intransigence and after-hours antics of the mayor, then buried by the my way or the highway attitude of his top cop. There's a reason that firefighters, police officers, and city administrative employees felt victimized by that administration. So we exported Esserman to solve part of the problem. But we didn't do the same with David. Now, he may be out of sight, out of mind down in D.C., but he's still a drag on the public payroll, and there's still no measure of value for that money. Really? What has now Congressman C done for you recently? Well, he led a 60s style sit-in on the floor of the House chamber. Do you remember what social evil that was supposed to combat? Anybody? Bueller? Well, it was the scandalous lack of gun control under which we still suffer. Really? Go tell that to the city of Chicago, Representative Cicilline. See what I mean about needing to export him as well? Remember in November. Are you kidding me?
Welcome back. Today we're talking with Jeremy Chiappetta, who's the Executive Director and Founding Principal of the Blackstone Valley Prep Mayoral Academy. We were talking about your teacher training, the fact that you work very hard to create a culture of excellence, of teaching excellence, of learning excellence. And that's that whole idea of that supporting relationships, the intertwining of students and families and teachers and executive directors is fairly innovative. And I think that's where charter schools began, right? You were supposed to be kind of laboratories of innovation, of finding ways that teaching worked better or learning worked better.
So, a lot of folks don't realize this, but it's somewhat ironic considering some of the conversation nationally and locally, but Albert Shanker, a great labor leader, is really the pioneer and champion of charter schools.
Okay, didn't know that.
And he really pushed the idea of creating an innovation lab, creating a way to incubate new ideas. And that is absolutely what I'm seeing happen here in Rhode Island. There are new models being tried at Blackstone Valley Prep and at other charter schools throughout the state. And we're also working hard to try to figure out how to best share those ideas so that we can ultimately raise the bar for all young people. Right? The reality is about 6% of our kids are in public charter schools in Rhode Island, which means 94% of our public school kids are not, right?
That's right.
And so we're not doing our job if we're doing great by our scholars
And you're not sharing
and
it.
we're not figuring out how to share it. And let's be honest, we don't have all the answers. And there are a whole bunch of great, exceptional, traditional public educators out there.
Yes, there
that
are.
we are needing to learn from, and we do learn from. And there's some really great partnerships out there that we're part of that we're excited about.
Well, so tell me about some of these partnerships, because you're right, it's not just about you helping kids, it's about you also improving education across Rhode Island.
Sure.
Right? Or
Sure.
helping.
Sure. So I think one of the most exciting pieces that we're embarking upon this year is we are partnered with the Pawtucket Learning Academy and Summit Schools in California and more than a dozen public schools around the country to
All charter schools or traditional?
No, mostly traditional public schools.
Okay.
But a mix, all focused on trying to figure out how to innovate learning to personalize the experience for young people. And really specifically, meet a child where they are, help them work through at a pace that works for them, and then ultimately make sure that everyone's achieving at a certain level. So for that young person who is a math whiz, and they get through algebra and algebra 2 and trig and pre-calc and calc, and they're able to do that in 2.5 years,
Yeah.
they're smarter than me.
Smarter than most of us when it comes to that, sure.
Right. But for someone else where
But
it
you
takes...
don't also want them after 2.5 years saying, well,
No, absolutely. And
twiddle
so,
my thumbs here for the next year and a half.
no, because then what
Then
happens
you
to that
get
young person?
behavior
They're-
problems, they turn off,
Absolutely.
they get bored. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so Summit has spent the last few years really building a new system based on what they saw. They were getting kids into college like crazy, right? They were doing incredibly well. They were actually featured in the film Waiting for Superman as a school that was succeeding, right? And so they're doing great, but their kids weren't succeeding in college at nearly the rate that they wanted. And so they reimagined the whole piece of their high school. And we're now replicating that model, and so is the Pawtucket Learning Academy. And we're doing it together. This past week, our teachers and their teachers have been in training sessions with a facilitator from Summit, California, all out here, and it's philanthropically funded, which is incredible, right? So we are doing right by young people, learning together with traditional educators, And those teachers at Pawtucket Learning Academy, they are veterans who have been serving some of the hardest to reach students, and we're learning a ton from them. Hopefully they're learning a little bit from us, because we've been doing blended learning for a year at our high school, really leveraging technology, and ultimately students are winning.
Yeah, it's about them winning. And I liked what you said at the beginning of that. It's about finding where students are. Not just looking out and saying they should be here, but really finding out where they are. They might be over here, right? And making sure you meet them there and move them forward.
Fast. Sometimes
Sometimes
we have to operate with an urgency that the best teachers throughout the country are operating with, and certainly my expectation is every teacher at BVP is operating with. Right?
Yeah.
We have young people coming to us 3, 4, 5 years below level.
That's right. Not every kid comes with the same background, with
No.
the same educational experiences, with the same family support. They're somewhere, and you got to find out where it is, and then find it there. Don't teach them up here when they're back here, but move them forward. Just keep moving them forward.
But ultimately,
But don't discard them because they're not here.
no, absolutely not. And ultimately, our young people have to be here for that diploma to mean something.
Yep.
And that has to be our promise and our commitment to our young
That
people.
no matter where you start, you're going to
No
end
matter
up here
where you start, you are graduating from a Rhode Island public school.
with
college
real
and career
skills.
ready.
That's right. With real skills to be
Absolutely.
employable.
You can read, you can write, you can do science, you can do math at a level that's real.
All right. Do you know of any other? I know there was one of my colleagues talked about a relationship she had with a charter school. She's an elementary school principal in a traditional school, and she said that it had really the sharing partnership that they had. They improved each other. Do you know of any other things like that? I know you know Blackstone Valley Prep.
Sure,
but
sure.
Are there others of
Right, so-
sharing?
So, I mean, one other quick example of BVP is our partnership with Central Falls. And just, we're outsourcing our special education leadership to them, learning so much from them in terms of their expertise. And that's
In
great.
special education.
In special education in particular. And it's carrying over. But the story you referenced, I believe, is the learning community partnering in Woonsocket. I know that's happening. I think it's North Smithfield as well. I know
Reading
that
scores.
working on reading, right, which is foundational. You've got the International Charter School working with the district in South Kingstown to replicate their model of dual language, which is such an innovative approach to educating young people, where at the International Charter School they do, I believe their model is they do a week in English and then a week in either Spanish or Portuguese.
Okay.
And so their students
that takes some work, doesn't it?
and they're replicating it with
Right.
traditional public schools in other places.
Great.
You look at the Highlander Institute, which is part of Highlander Charter School, and they are national leaders. They are Rhode Island leaders. They are national leaders when it comes to leveraging technology in classrooms. And they have 40 plus educators, teachers, principals from traditional and charter schools, mostly traditional schools,
Sharing with one another.
sharing with one another best practices, training, professional development, conferences, some really great innovations.
Great. We're going to have to stop here in just about a minute, but I did want to talk about other states, and you've mentioned that there are other states. I know you mentioned California. How many other states have charter schools? Are we one out here?
So it's us, California, and 40 other states. So there's
Okay.
42 states in the country.
42.
42.
Okay.
Almost all of New England has charter school laws that allow charter schools to exist. I've visited schools in probably a dozen states. One of the things that we do to get better is to visit great schools. The greater Boston area has some of the highest performing charter schools in the country, which is exciting because we can have our teachers actually just drive up the road and see some amazing action there. We also regularly visit schools here in Rhode Island.
So charter schools are working, and they're working well for families, for teachers, and especially for students then.
Absolutely. And when they're not, they can be closed.
They can be closed or they can be made better.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Well, great. It's so nice to have talked with you. I know a lot of people really wanted to understand charter schools, and I think you've been a great spokesman for them.
Thanks, Representative.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
The working world is a competitive environment. We mere mortals must offer something substantial to the real world of work, or we will be replaced by someone who can do a better job of it. Okay, That said, there are many variations on the theme of productivity. Today, I am going to try to convince you that many of our elected officials are playing the game of politics unproductively. You and I know that once elected, our politicians will do whatever they think will convince you and I that they are working hard to better our lives, whether they are doing anything important or not. Here's the issue. As an active duty naval officer, my performance was evaluated on a routine basis. Once a year, I got a fitness report from my commanding officer. That evaluation went into my permanent record to be used by promotion boards that decided who got to advance. The military promotion system is an up or out world. You have to do better than your peers or you're gone. Your fitness reports have real meaning, and every naval officer who makes it to the top understands the importance of what they write about their subordinates. The words that are used to describe individual accomplishments are well known and appreciated by all the military folks who read them. Our military services depend on people who take care of each other while competing for promotion. Every person in a military unit has a value to the unit that is unique. When one member of the unit isn't available, the unit fills in until there is nothing left of the unit. The environment that our United States military services have created is unique in American society, in my view. Having said all of that, I would like to shift to the world of political representation. How do we voters evaluate the work of our elected officials? Do they get an annual fitness report? Who keeps track of their efforts? How do they describe success or failure in their daily work? If the system of personal evaluation used by the military were transposed to the political elite, we might not have any Rhode Island politicians left on duty. Here's an example of what's wrong. The Portsmouth Patch carried an article recently concerning the work of Congressman David Cicilline. As a congressman, Representative Cicilline is responsible for representing all the folks in his district and using his intelligence and influence to manage the affairs of the entire country. How well is he doing is the question. If he is receiving a top-notch fitness report, maybe we should promote him to another term. But who is writing the report? I have searched for the answer, but the report is not there. I can only judge his effectiveness by what I see and hear. Okay, so recently, United States Representative Cicilline made the news saying he will be filing a piece of legislation this fall that will solve the problem of student debt. Great idea. Of course, the congressman and his staff prepared a statement that they intend for you and I to read, suggesting that the congressman is right on track and doing a great job representing us. But what has he really done? Well, the reality is that the House and Senate Education Committees have already held dozens of hearings on the Higher Education Act. Originally passed in 1965, the Act has been amended 9 times since then. The latest, in 2013, actually has expired but was extended. The word on the street is that a reauthorization of the law will not happen this year, given the time constraints, or next year, given presidential politics. So what is Congressman Cicilline really doing? In a world of Republican majorities in Congress, Representative Cicilline has a snowball's chance to get anything to a vote. How many co-sponsors does he say he has? Well, too early to do that. What is really instructive is the way the congressman presents an idea to an electorate, one that most likely is unaware of the events surrounding the Higher Education Act. The words in the article suggest that the congressman's legislation will solve the problem of student debt. The Making College More Affordable Act, if enacted, would make it possible for students to borrow from the taxpayers and not have to pay any interest on the debt, amongst other notable proposals. What a great idea. The federal answer to college debt has created a $1.2 trillion debt that some 43 million kids have to pay. Now, Congressman Cicilline wants that debt to get refinanced. Why not? But the real issue is the deceptive way we are all presented with the perception that we have elected a representative who is working hard on our behalf, who should be awarded a 4.0 fitness evaluation for getting the job done. Nope. I think he should be censored for misleading us. There is a reason politicians get the lowest approval ratings. They can't be trusted. The most recent Gallup poll asking about honesty and ethics in the professions rates the members of Congress as next to last. Our nurses continue to lead the charge, with 85% of us giving them a very high mark. The members of Congress got an 8%. Thank you for watching, and God bless.